Because the truth is, if you are trying to rely on willpower and discipline, chances are you're forbidding yourself from enjoying some of the things that you truly do want to experience. And that's something that gets a little bit more challenging to work against over time. Welcome to the second half of my holiday survival series. And I say survival with a bit of a little cheekiness because I don't actually think that your life should be something that you feel like you have to battle to survive. But I do think that a lot of us can relate to going into some of these situations, especially when we have sometimes complicated family dynamics or different challenges around being in a different environment or different schedules that we can relate to, that feel sometimes like we have to prepare for something that is very challenging. Now, if you watched the last episode, you'll remember that we talked a lot about the psychology behind all or nothing thinking and perfectionist tendencies, and where we usually fall into those patterns when we struggle around these different situations that come up, especially around the holidays. This week, we're going to take that a step further and just talk a little bit about willpower and non-negotiables and putting all that into action when it comes to having a really solid approach around food. Now, this episode isn't about having everything in writing and planning everything out to a T. It's more so going to be around deciding what matters ahead of time so that you can be in the moment and enjoy the things that you want and not stress around small changes and adjustments with your schedule or the food that you're around or what have you. Now, if you're like me in the past and the holidays have been a real big source of stress because of the way that it impacted your routine and your body and the way you feel about yourself, I want to just ask that you approach this holiday season with a mindset of really looking at having more understanding around what makes sense for you rather than focusing on trying to have more discipline. Because the truth is, if you are trying to rely on willpower and discipline, chances are you're forbidding yourself from enjoying some of the things that you truly do want to experience. And that's something that gets a little bit more challenging to work against over time. Willpower is kind of like a muscle, and the more that we use it, the weaker it gets. So if you're going into the holidays telling yourself not to enjoy any chocolate, not to have any treats, not to have any days where you're eating a little bit more food, chances are you're going to end up feeling like a bit of a failure if you do have those things. And we want to ask ourselves, if that's something that's important to you, why? Why are you feeling so bad about it? Why are you telling yourself that you shouldn't have this? It's something that I had to spend a lot of time thinking about in my own approach with the holidays, and I think something that's really worthy of some self-reflection. So first, I want to talk about setting yourself up with some very clear non-negotiables, because I think that having non-negotiables is kind of just like getting really clear on what your standards are. They're not big, lofty goals or setting yourself up with too much rigidity and structure. It's actually just you going, psh, I could totally do that. Or like, under any circumstances, I really want to make sure that I'm doing X. So all they're going to do is just protect you when you're in these situations where you don't have a lot of control over your environment or your schedule. And they're things that you can rely on to help you feel grounded and help you feel connected with your health and fitness, even if that looks a little bit different from how you would normally be approaching those days. Some examples of this is something as simple as just having a breakfast with 30 grams of protein, or making sure that you're getting out for your daily steps, or having 2 to 3 workouts per week no matter what you're eating. And these are things that you can choose to rely on that can still remind you that you're checking the boxes and you're still showing up for yourself, even if the rest of your day looks very different than it normally would. Now, another way to look at this, which is one of my clients' favorite tools to use over the holidays, is using something that we call the 75% rule. Just imagine that you have 4 quadrants. Each quadrant is obviously 25%. 3 of those 4 quadrants are going to be a high protein and a high fiber meal. The last one is going to be movement of any kind, including exercise, a walk, or what have you. Now, all you have to do is try to get 75% accomplished out of that 100% every single day. Meaning that could look like 2 high protein, high fiber meals and going for a workout, or that could be just getting 3 high protein, high fiber meals. This is something that's really great to use because it's actually the hierarchy of what's really important. If you're getting enough protein and you're getting enough fiber, chances are you're going to feel pretty full. You're going to have stable energy. You might have a little bit more predictable hunger during the day. And that doesn't mean that you can't also have the chocolate or you can't also have the cheesecake. And that's just going to make sure that you're not showing up to meals like this famished little hunger troll who just wants to eat everything in sight and doesn't feel like they can control themselves at all. Now, if you're somebody who wants a little bit more structure and you're curious to understand the difference between being in a calorie deficit versus setting your calories up at maintenance over the holidays, let's go through clearly what that could look like for you and understand the difference between those two things, because I know a lot of people who follow a lot of online calculators to set up their calories, and that just kind of leaves you in the dark with not understanding the difference between being in a deficit versus being at maintenance. And without that information, I often see those people also really overwhelmed and struggling when they're eating a little bit more food because they don't know how much space they have between being in a deficit versus being at maintenance or being in a place where you would gain your weight back. So let's just get really clear on what that is and what that isn't. Now, calorie deficits are usually set up about 250 to 500 calories below maintenance. Maintenance calories is essentially you just being in a net neutral calorie intake, which would mean that you are burning just as many calories as you're intaking. As soon as we start to eat less than our body needs to maintain our weight, that puts us in a calorie deficit. Now, again, if you're in a calorie deficit of about 250 to 500 calories, that means that if you eat an additional 100 calories, you're still not at maintenance, meaning you're not going to gain any weight. Even though the scale might fluctuate a little bit, you are still in a deficit. So to explain this a different way, if your maintenance calorie intake is 2,000 calories per day and you've set yourself a calorie deficit of 500 calories, your daily goal would be 1,500 calories a day. Now, if you have a week where you eat a little bit more than that and you're eating 1,700, 1,800, 1,900 calories a day, you are still in a calorie deficit. It's not much of a deficit. It's only 100 to 300 calories less than maintenance, but that is still accumulating a calorie deficit, which will contribute to you losing body fat or weight over time. Now, if you are somebody who is eating at maintenance, then you're not actually going to gain any weight, even though you might fluctuate a little bit on the scale, mostly due to fluctuations in glycogen and just having more food in your stomach. That doesn't actually mean that you're gaining body fat. And on top of that, regardless of if you want to be in a calorie deficit, you don't actually have to commit to one or the other over the holidays. You can still choose to stay consistent with your deficit and have a few meals that you've structured to be closer to maintenance. Most people don't understand this and decide that they want to stick to their deficit through the holidays and just kind of white knuckle it through all their holiday meals and not allow themselves to enjoy anything. Or they decide that there's no way that they can see any progress or the whole food part is too overwhelming, and so they just kind of go and eat the whole house. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do either of those things. I'm really just suggesting that you understand your own patterns and where you typically fall over the holidays and just simply try to make a little bit of progress in terms of your approach with food and your relationship with food during the holiday season. Even still, eating at maintenance can still be something that is a strategic choice that helps you with your progress. If you're somebody who decides to eat a little bit more food intentionally, it's something that can really contribute to you having a little bit more energy, a little bit better mood, and also be something that you use for extra energy for your training sessions. Maybe you get a couple personal bests, maybe you focus on building a little bit of strength, but you can use that food to your advantage, especially if you're going to be working out while you're eating more food. So regardless of what you decide, whether you want to focus on being present and you don't want to be thinking about food and calories, or you're deciding to stay consistent with a deficit and maybe either trickle in some meals here and there or some treats that allow you to enjoy the nostalgic elements of the holidays, just understand that there's a difference between choosing something that you want to be doing and doing something that creates a lot of friction. If you're constantly having to rely on willpower, chances are you're actually forbidding yourself of something that you truly want to enjoy. And if you're forcing yourself to stick to something that isn't truly what you want, at some point we have the right environment, the right amount of pressure, the right emotions, the right food in front of us, where we often just lean into those choices regardless, and sometimes start to feel a little bit more impulsive because we feel that shame attached to that choice. If you're finding yourself in those moments, just take a breath, slow down, and take ownership. Just remind yourself, this is something that I obviously want. This is something that I'm making a conscious choice to enjoy. And sometimes that ownership and that responsibility allows us to slow down and stop the spiral that tends to happen around food when we feel like we shouldn't be doing something. Just take ownership. Remind yourself it's okay if I want to eat this. Just allow yourself to fully enjoy that chocolate bar and enjoy every single bite rather than coming from a place where you're feeling really impulsive, your heart rate is elevated, and you're feeling like your mind is spinning around all the ways you shouldn't be doing this. And if you do find this happening often, there might be some things for you to explore with structure, because structure is not meant to be something that controls every little piece of food that goes into your mouth, but something that reduces decision fatigue and allows you to make sure that you're giving your body its basic foundational needs, so that when you do have chocolate and treats and all those things that tend to be around us on the holidays, you're not coming at it from a place of having biological hunger or being undernourished. You're actually feeling pretty good around food because you've been taking care of your body, and it gets a little bit easier to know how to incorporate those things without feeling like you're throwing in the towel. Now, on the other hand, if you're somebody whose biggest struggles come from what other people tell you to do around food, that can be a really sticky thing to explore over the holidays, especially when it's people who are really close to us. The first thing that I think is really important to understand when it comes to food pushers and setting boundaries is that it's not usually about food and it's not usually about you. It's usually about that person and what makes them feel comfortable, what makes them feel loved, or even sometimes them placing on you the way that they would like you to experience whatever event you're at. We've all been at that family dinner where the dessert comes around and you're saying no, and somebody's continuing to offer you another slice. And as you say no politely, they continue to start to make comments around why they wish you were enjoying more food, or how you should just eat this, or you should just eat more of that, and you should allow yourself to just relax a little bit around food. Now, sometimes this type of an approach really does come from a place of care and wanting the best for you, and for you wanting to feel comfortable around eating the things that you want. But sometimes it's a bit disjointed, because even if you have already eaten those foods, they might still be just giving meaning around you not wanting to eat more. And once these conversations start to feel a little bit circular and you feel like you've repeated yourself a couple times, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable to set a little bit more of a boundary. But just remember that you don't owe anybody justification around what you are or aren't eating. But when people do push you to eat a little bit more food even after you've said no, here are a few different strategies to deal with that. The first one is for you to just reassure them that you are enjoying yourself, because oftentimes people are requesting that you eat more because they think that's how you experience enjoyment. And that might be a way of how you experience enjoyment, but people can sometimes be uncomfortable with the fact that you're not continuing with that because that's what they would like to see you do. So you can say something like, I'm enjoying myself, I'm just not eating anymore. Or if someone is continuing to ask and you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, what you can do is redirect the situation to ask them a little bit more about themselves. Sometimes that will distract them from focusing so much on you and what you're doing. So saying something like, I'm good, why don't you tell me a little bit more about your trip? Ask them something about themselves. People love that. And that little request to ask you to eat more food might be a way for them to try to create a little bit of distance from some awkwardness that they might be feeling. Even if that isn't really there on your end, people do experience social anxiety or strained family dynamics, and sometimes that's a way of people kind of extending an olive branch. So you asking them about themselves can be a way to create a little bit of positivity out of a situation that might normally feel a little bit hard. Now, obviously, we can be kind and offer really positive, genuine forms of connection, and sometimes people just still won't take the hint. You can say something like, I've said no a few times. I'm not sure if maybe there's something that you're uncomfortable with around that. And that can just cause people to slow down a little bit and reflect on the way that they're showing up. And if you're starting to feel uncomfortable with having these conversations, especially in a group situation, you may want to bookmark that and encourage that you might need to have a conversation about that outside of this situation. Saying something like, I feel like how I'm eating means a lot to you. Is that something that you wanted to talk about later? And again, that's putting the ownership on them to address why they're so uncomfortable with the choices that you're making, or really just highlighting that they're really not respecting your boundaries. Now, again, most of the time, these are coming from a really loving place where people just want to connect more. And many of us do connect through sharing experiences through food, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's really just important that you understand how to navigate those situations so that you're not feeling uncomfortable and you're not left making decisions around food that you're not feeling happy about. Now, outside of food pushers, if you're somebody who wants to follow some structure, especially if you're in a period of trying to focus on body composition goals, maybe you're trying to lose some fat, build some muscle, make some positive changes, and you're worried about how those holiday meals might impact your progress, there's a few different choices that you have, and understanding these choices is something that can really simplify your approach. You essentially have three choices. One, you can not track at all. Two, you can guesstimate and estimate how much you're eating. Or three, you can track your food to the best of your ability, whether that means actually mapping out exactly how much you ate or following the regular portion sizes that you would have. Whatever you decide is important for you to just get clear on what that can look like for you so that you have given yourself permission to enjoy things in a way that feels in alignment with your goals. Now, sometimes tracking our food can help because it gives us goalposts and understanding where we are in relation to where we normally would be around food. And it can also serve as a learning experience where we're able to look at these different meals that don't normally fall within the way that we normally prep our food and understand how far that might be from our normal intake. Now, this can be something that's used to help you improve your understanding around how to eat for your goals and how to maintain your progress long term. And it can also become something that creates a lot of mental noise where we're constantly questioning what we're eating and spiraling around trying to make decisions around the food that we're eating. And in that situation, that's something that we want to address directly, where tracking might not be something that's helpful. Now that you understand how to navigate these different situations with food, the next step is to build your social calendar intentionally. And this is where it really all comes together. Once you map out how the holiday meals will look, and that includes your work lunches, your gatherings with friends, your potlucks, your Christmas Eve dinner, your New Year's Day brunch, the first thing to understand is that you don't have to say yes to everything. Sure, when you plan that out, you probably realize that you have a higher amount of social eating situations than you normally do in a very short period of time, but choose events that matter. You might not need to enjoy all of the food in all of the situations to feel like you're really connecting properly and that you're really enjoying yourself. On top of that, I think something that people really skip out on is not just planning how to fill their calendar with these social events, but also how to plan in self-care around that. If you're not in your own home, if you're around tricky family dynamics, you're traveling a lot, you may be a little bit stressed out over the schedule that you have over the holidays, make sure that you plan some time to yourself to go for walks, have a workout, take a bath, do whatever you can to really focus on the ways that you can recover and recharge your battery from all of this chaos. Most importantly, when you learn how to incorporate these principles into your social calendar, you're really learning that your calendar is also something that contributes to your success with your health and fitness. And if you avoid actually learning how to handle these situations, you're really doing yourself a disservice. And chances are you're going to do the same thing in every social situation, which is to just say fuck it and throw in the towel and then start over the next time you feel motivation. And we all know that that's not the best mindset when it comes to having long-term consistency and really just feeling good in our bodies all year round. So to wrap this up, you really don't need to control every little piece of your life in order to see success. The goal is really just to learn to trust yourself and your decision making in those situations. This is essentially how you build a fitness identity that survives your real life and doesn't just work under these false pretenses that we tend to create for ourselves when we're following a plan. Now, I'd love to know which non-negotiable you're choosing to commit to, whether that is over the holidays or you're watching this in some other season of life. Please comment below and let me know. I really do love engaging with people. And if you like these videos, don't forget to like and follow and subscribe.